I'm poet and writer Case Spivey. Almost a year ago, I posted a video about how to compile a collection of poetry. Now, some of you might be wondering, what am I supposed to do after I have the collection compiled? So today, I'm going to talk to you about what to do once you already have a poetry collection compiled and you're seeking to publish it. First, go check out my previous video I did on how to compile a collection of poetry, and I will also leave a link at the end of the video about the pros and cons to self-published versus traditionally published poetry books. This is not necessarily a guide for if you want to try and make it big as a self-published poet on, say, Instagram. Oh, Kizuko will say hi. Susie will say hi this time. This is if you want to publish an actual book of poetry, one you can hold in your hand. So there's a couple of different routes that you can take. The first one is traditional publishing, going through one of the major publishing companies, such as, to just grab a few big ones, Grey Wolf Press is a pretty big one. Copper Canyon Press is of course one of the bigger poetry publishers in the US. To go through one of those publishing houses and have a collection published by them. Occasionally, you might be one of those breakout internet stars who get scouted and picked up online, and then that's going to be a whole different situation. But if you're going to be just sending out your poetry collection, it's not actually that different from when you're just submitting to literary magazines, which is one of the big differences between submitting poetry to submitting, say, a novel. When you're submitting a novel, you're going to be pretty much going through an agent, and the agent is going to solicit the publisher for you. When you're submitting a poetry collection, a lot of times the publishers will have a certain period in the year where they read slush pile poetry collections, and more often than not, that's when you're going to be submitting your book very similarly to how you would submit to just a normal literary journal. You'll just read their submission guidelines and you'll send in. Now, I do want to say a lot of times there are some kind of reading fees that come along with this. You need to be a little bit careful about reading fees with poetry. They tend to be very common, and I've talked about these a lot in a lot of other videos. When you're submitting individual poems, it really doesn't make a lot of sense to be putting out any kind of money in order to have those sold. Sometimes in some situations, sending out a little bit of money in order to have your entire collection looked at might be worthwhile to you. Two of the things you really want to keep in mind though with traditional publishing is you need to avoid vanity presses. Now, these are going to come in a couple of different ways. Now, normally, when it comes to a vanity press, and this is going to be something you need to watch for smaller publishers. If you're going for a really big publishing house, 9 times out of 10, they've done this before, they know what they're looking for. It's going to be hard to get in, but you won't run into this issue. But smaller publishing houses occasionally can be vanity presses, or they can be vanity press in disguise. Now, a vanity press asks you for money up front. Because of the way the publishing industry works, with poetry being a little bit asky of money when you submit your work, it gets a little bit tricky. Sometimes a vanity press will ask for a very small amount of money as like a reading fee. Sometimes a bigger publishing press will also ask for a reading fee for manuscripts. You need to really balance what the pros and cons are for each thing. If they're asking for a reading fee, you need to be careful about royalties as well. Most publishers who are legitimate are going to send you a certain number of copies of your book once it's published for you to then sell on your own. They don't offer any copies. Be a little bit suspicious, especially because so much of poetry is print on demand now. So they're not actually losing any money in publishing your book. They are completely gaining money. Be warned. One of the biggest things about traditional publishing that is going to launch you is if you have a book published by a publisher who has a bigger reach than you, which is the #1 reason to publish traditionally, by the way. If they have a bigger reach than you, then you should be making quite a bit more money going through that method because more people are seeing your book. It has a good name behind it. And I go into that more in the pros and cons of traditional publishing. But okay, this is supposed to be about how and not like what to watch out for, but just be very, very cautious of vanity presses. A lot of times they're going to present the same way. There'll be a small reading fee, Many times they are not going to offer you any copies of your manuscript. Many times they're not going to offer very much help. Maybe they'll do the formatting, but they won't do the cover. Maybe they'll post your book on their website, but they're not going to, for example, get you an interview with another press, or for example, tweet about you. Just some examples. Just be really, really mindful when you're going in and do extra lot of research. But also be mindful about small presses. There are small presses who will do the extra legwork, who will make it worth your while. If you're going with a bigger publishing house, just keep in mind what you're going to be doing is following their submission guidelines and then sending in your manuscript. Someone's going to read it and they're going to reject or accept it. It's going to be very, very similar to when you're sending in your individual poems to a literary journal, because most of the poetry houses don't put out much poetry because there's not a lot of return on investment for them, especially for new aspiring writers. I've gone into this in many other videos, but people don't give poetry a chance until they've heard it already. People are not in the business of picking up new poets they've never heard of. It's just not the way people respond to poetry. They want more of someone that they already trust, more often than they're willing to give someone new a try. So publishing houses publish a very, very small number, and you're going to have to really wow them in order to get published by them. Keep that in mind. I'll jump into the next one right away, which is self-publishing, which is a great way to start off. To be honest, if this is your first time publishing, self-publishing may really be the best route for you. Sometimes if you, for example, have interned somewhere, have a relationship with a college press or something, traditional publishing can be a better route to take. A lot of times, self-publishing is going to be a lot more helpful to you for especially your first chapbook. I think self-publishing your first chapbook is just something everybody should do. It's so easy now with print on demand. You can, KDP makes it very easy. Not quite as easy as CreateSpace did, even though they kind of swallowed up CreateSpace. And I have to say, I do not think the quality is as good as CreateSpace was. I don't know if that's just the tea or what, but I do think KDP is not quite as streamlined, not quite as helpful, and not quite as high quality. But great, easy to use platform. You can figure it out, no problem. No cost to you, and you can start getting your chapbook out to people pretty easily with that. The one big drawback to self-publishing your collection is going to be there's not going to be anyone to tell you no. If you happen to publish with somebody, they are basically the gatekeeper. They either say yes, this is good enough, no, it isn't good enough, and then they say here's some things that aren't working, we need those changed before we actually publish it. Nobody's going to do that for you if you're self-publishing, so you do need to find somebody who is going to do those things for you and tell you where you're wrong, where you have mistakes, where something needs to be changed. You need somebody else to look at it before you would publish it. And by just somebody else, I mean like as many people as possible. Ideally get an editor, look through it a million times, and then have a friend look through it a million times. Have someone else you trust, another poet, another writer, look through it a million times. You want it to be your best work because you want this to represent you. One last good way to get published is kind of back to the traditionally published method. I wanted to save this for last because I feel like it's kind of a weird category by itself, but this is contests. There's all kinds of back and forth, controversy, non-controversy about contests. It is a good way to get in with a big press. A lot of larger presses will put on a big poetry manuscript contest once a year, twice a year, so on and so forth. All of them have their own thing. Usually there's going to be an entry fee with a contest. However, if there is an entry fee, there should also be a winning prize. And the prize should be monetary as well as a certain number of collections. I feel that is vital for a contest being worth submitting to. There should be a monetary prize, which is kind of like getting an advance, which is not that common for first-time poets, so that's great. Zuko is back, he says hello. Okay. And then they should be giving you a certain amount of copies of your collection to then sell on your own. A contest can be a really great way to just sudden promotion if you happen to win, or sometimes even if you're one of the runners up, it can just launch you out because all of the people who entered are going to be watching for the contest, so they're all going to see your name when you win. Automatically, that's pretty good marketing right there. Sometimes it can be a good thing. I would say even for a really good prize, really don't be putting out more than $25 towards a reading fee. Oftentimes what they put in the reading fees for contests is they get some big poet to read. And if you are a fan of that big poet who is being the judge, it can be a really great thing, because what if your favorite poet chose your collection, you know? Like, that's the dream, isn't it? If you're going for contests, expect there to be some kind of money you're going to have to put out. Sometimes read up on the contest. There are some that are a little notorious for already having someone in mind that they want to publish, or for publishing someone who is in some way connected to either the publication or to the judge. So use your own best judgment on that one, but contests can be a really great way. Now, how can you find all of these different methods? There's a couple of places online that just have these listings. One is poetsandwriters.org, pw.org. That's a really good free resource for you to find all of this kind of information. Duotrope is not a free resource, but if you want to pay their I think it's a yearly subscription. I don't think they actually do monthly subscription. It's like $50 for the year. They also have listings for all of those things. You can also just start Google searching. Be a little bit cautious. If you're just Google searching places to publish, be warned that some of those places may not be all that legit. That's not to say that non-legit presses, or I won't say non-legit, but vanity presses don't make their way into listings like poetsandwriters.org. It does happen, so make sure that you do your research, because a lot of times the ones that are sort of moonlighting as not a vanity press are going to make it through. Now, I've used a couple of terms that I'll just clarify. A chapbook is typically between 20 to 50 poems. It's a shorter book. It can be less. It could be a little more, although if you're going over 50 poems, you're really heading into the full-length category. Usually a full-length poetry collection could be anywhere between like 60 to 100 pages. Probably more than 100 isn't terribly common in poetry. Even if you pull out some, like, oh, let's see, who do I have who's pretty well known? Here we go. I got a Billy Collins one. He's pretty well known, and his poetry collection, traditionally published, of course, a pretty thick one, comes in at 112 pages, and these are some meaty little pages. These are like some nice recycled paper kind of pages. So going over 100 pages, you should really stay away from. But I think I covered that in my How to Compile the Poetry Collection video, so make sure you go and check that one out. That's all I have to talk about today. If you have more questions about like what route to take, or what route would be best for you to take when publishing a collection of poetry, leave your comments down below. Also stay tuned. I'm going to have a bit of a it's a part 3 actually, if I'm counting the Compiling the Poetry Collection one. Part 3 is going to be methods for marketing poetry. So stay tuned for that one. This is my first time really doing kind of like a part 3. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. And until next time, I'm Kay Spivey, and good luck to all of us. Bye!